by Bob Wygant. Bob?
How you doing, everyone?
And we also have a few guest speakers today. Greta Eckert. Greta, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
And I think Deborah McPherson is going to be speaking a little today, too. Deborah, are you out there? I think
I am. Yeah. Can you hear me? Yes, I'm here.
Yes, we can. Good.
Okay.
Glad you're all here, and welcome everyone again. We'll be starting in just a minute or two. People are still joining, and I think we're going to get a few more attendees, so we'll give it a couple more minutes. You should be able to hear me, but not be able to speak without asking for permission to do that. You can either raise your hand using the control in GoToMeeting, or you can post a question using the question dialog box in GoToMeeting. Then I will try to either let you, hopefully I'll be able to let you speak if you have a question. We just have limited, limit the open lines to keep the background noise down. If you are logged into the webinar, if you can hear me and you're not logged into the webinar and can't see my screen, send me a note. I'll try to help you out. Otherwise, you have an option to either use your VoIP through your computer or use your telephone. If you have the telephone, you do need to put in an audio pin so that I can unmute you. So if you do want to speak and you haven't done that, I'll send one to you. So be aware of that. Okay. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see. So here's our agenda for today. Bob and I will have some opening remarks. And then we've got several things we're going to cover today. We'll go over those and just maybe spend a couple minutes on what's going on at Construct, and then talk about our next meeting. So today's meeting is a couple topics. Bob's going to take us back through some of the things he talked about last week with knowledge management, since we sort of wrapped that up in a hurry at the end. Then we wanted to really talk a little bit about OmniClass and what's been going on with it as a framework for knowledge management, and then move into a discussion of work we're trying to do to develop some guidelines or implementation guidance for implementing BIM in your firm as a specifier initially and eventually in other practice areas. Before we get into that, though, in case we run out of time at the end, maybe we'll just talk about what's going on at Construct for a minute.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
What we have planned at Construct are a few different sessions. First being the BIM and information session on Tuesday, May 11th from 2 to 5. That's going to be hosted by Mark Kalin and myself. I'm not sure, Roger, are you going to be at that one as well?
I may be there a little, but I've got a conflict, Bob, so I think it's going to be mostly you and Mark.
Okay. Followed by the BIM and Sustainability Practice Group's education session, which, again, Mark, Roger, and I will be, Mark Kalin, Roger, and I will be hosting that from 4 to 5 on Thursday. And right after that session is a reception for the practice groups that's sponsored by RCAT, and that's from 5 to 6:30. Right after that session, so everybody, please come by.
Hey, Bob, can you check your mic? I don't know if it's you or me, but one of us people are having a little trouble hearing us, so maybe just make sure you're close to it or whatever.
Okay, is that any better?
That does seem a lot clearer, yeah.
All right, great. So those are the sessions that we're doing at Construct. And obviously, because of the timing, that's going to end. The session there is really going to be our practice group session as well. So, I hope to see, a lot of you people out there at Construct, put some faces to names. And that's pretty much what we're doing at Construct.
All right, and that'll be our next meeting, by the way, will be the one that we have at Construct. We won't have an online meeting in May, so hopefully you can join us there. If not, we'll return in June with a meeting, which I didn't really pick a date for yet, but maybe since we're here, we should try to do that if we can. Just have a look at the calendar in June. See. Normally, I guess we would go for the 18th. I might not be available on the 18th, so.
Yeah, the 25th may be better. Is AIA the week of the 8th? Is that AIA that same week, or is it the week prior?
AIA is actually the 11th, the week of.
Okay, so there's no conflict there.
So should we try for the 25th?
Yeah, I think either would be fine. Kids are going to be out of school, starting to get out of school the week of the 21st or the 25th. So I'm not sure whether people are going to be busy during that week. I could go either way, though.
Yeah, well, the 18th doesn't work for me, so let's try the 25th, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose that's fine.
All right. So we got all this logistics out of the way up front. We'll send out an invitation for everybody, of course. So I guess, Bob, we're ready for me to turn over to you and talk a little bit about knowledge management.
Okay. Yeah, if you just hand over the screen, I can.
Let's see. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, and.
You should get your screen any minute.
There it is.
Okay, and all right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure that it's not a split screen that you're looking at. Well, what I wanted to do was kind of follow up where we left off. Last month, I was able to really go in depth into what knowledge management is in terms of my thoughts of how it can add to the architectural process and how a specifier can really enhance the abilities of an IPD. So what I wasn't really able to get into much depth about is why and how knowledge management can be done. So I want to go back into it, revisit it a little bit, skipping through the what and going into the why and how.
Bob?
Yes.
In the spirit of starting some discussion right off the bat, I think I have to challenge you on on the title of your session here, or your concept, I should say.
Okay.
Are you really committed to architectural knowledge management, or is this really go beyond what architecture per se? Maybe
well, yeah, I suppose that it would go past architectural knowledge management into engineering, construction, facilities management. There is no real term for this individual as of yet. This is all conceptual and work in progress, but your challenge is noted and very much valid. So the thoughts here would be the thoughts here are really starting from an architectural perspective. How do you take the information that applies to the project? So perhaps it could be project knowledge management or construction knowledge management.
Ah, that's good. We got a comment to that effect. I think we got in, when we did talk a little bit about this last month, there was some confusion with who was the architect's project captain or manager versus this position. So maybe some additional thought might be good there. Okay, well, sorry to interrupt you right off the bat, but.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Just quickly, to revisit what knowledge management is for those who weren't here last month. The concept is to put an individual in the center of the
Bob,
design team.
I'm sorry to interrupt you again in the middle of speaking, but someone who's unmuted is giving us some background noise. So, Deborah, I guess I'm going to mute you again, and if it one of the other presenters, just be careful. Thank you. Sorry, Bob.
Oh, that's okay. The concept of knowledge management is to put an individual at the hub of all of the processes within a project. So you have the design team, you have the owner, you have suppliers, and you have construction. And there's a considerable amount of information associated with all of these areas of design and implementation that needs to be managed in some way, shape, or form. So if you create an individual who becomes a point of contact and a point of responsibility, you can manage all of this information fairly effectively. Everything from design considerations from schematic design all the way through life cycle information for facilities management. All of this information can be used from the beginnings all the way through to retasking of the facility. But we'd spoken in depth about that last month, so I don't want to get really too in depth with that. But the real concept here that I want to get into this month is who is the knowledge manager, why and how. The knowledge manager, should be an individual who has a considerable amount of experience with areas of design, areas of construction, areas of facilities management, and understanding of products. So, somebody who has the ability to develop specs, somebody who has baseline drafting experience, so they can understand what should go into the models graphically without overburdening a project. So making models that are lightweight, that show the amount of detail commensurate with the phase in which the project is at. Somebody who can quickly modify the information inside of a model. So outside of graphics, somebody can go under the hood of a BIM project and add pieces of information that can be taken back out later, and also take that information out later for other people to use. And then being able to modify that information post-bid to show real products that have been put into the project. So it's not just, conceptually, here's the type of desk that's being used or the type of window. You have the ability to put in an actual window with actual values in it. In addition to this type of experience, a clear understanding of standards and formats, and that above and beyond uniformat and master format, now we're starting to get into OmniClass and some new formats that are very critical to the success of a BIM project. Deb McPherson's going to talk to us about that a little bit later, but understanding how the standards and formats relate to each other and how to implement them into the project so the information can come back out easily. And somebody who can format templates that can be used for schedules and quantity takeoffs, so that if you need to know specifics about products, if on every project you're going to need to know these 5 attributes of a window, having templates ready to go that can just be dropped into a project and automatically pull the information out. And then finally, somebody who understands from a local perspective, somebody who can understand their local codes. So if you're building a project in Florida, your codes are going to be considerably different than if you're building it in New Jersey. And somebody who can understand the design intent of the building in terms of performance, sustainability, aesthetics, owner's requirements. becomes critical aspects. So, it's a lot of information that a single person or a single entity may be responsible for. But, again, if this individual is brought in and can be successful, you can really streamline a lot of processes in the project. And when is knowledge management useful and when is it necessary? At what points can a knowledge manager be helpful? During schematic design, a knowledge manager can interview an architect and figure out what components and assemblies are necessary to begin a basic design. So you have this individual that's basically sourcing out BIM content. So the architect doesn't have to hunt and peck to find the components that they're looking for. If a knowledge manager comes in, does an interview, and can figure out here are the basic walls, here are the basic openings. And during schematic design, you really need little more than that. Walls, floors, ceilings, roofs, and openings. And it'll get you a basic idea and a layout of the project. During design development, being able to modify and augment the elements that were originally given to the architect to suit project requirements. As decisions are made, so an opening becomes a door becomes a steel door becomes a right-hand in-swing steel door with a 2-hour fire rating and XYZ hardware on it. So as those decisions are made, this person can actually update the componentry and make sure that it gets to the appropriate parties to get into that model. So you're actually supplying the design-based components so that the architect can use it without having to find all this information on their own. During CD, all this information that has gone in from schematic and design development can be shaken back out to very quickly create a set of project documents or a project manual, project specifications. By taking all that information and having it all in one place, really spitting it out in almost a spreadsheet, or in some ways potentially having it spit out directly into some sort of form document, and then being able to harmonize the model with those construction documents. So all the information that's in the model is the same that's all the information that's on paper. So at any given time when something changes, it changes in two places. Now, during bidding, the knowledge manager can take the model and create a snapshot of that model as a control. So during product selection, you can qualify and approve alternates by doing apples-to-apples comparisons. You can actually do line item by lining up these attributes in a schedule and saying here's manufacturer A, manufacturer B, and manufacturer C against the control that was my reference standard, and you can look at it and say here are the manufacturers that can compete, and here are the ones that are inferior. So you can make accurate decisions on who is in fact an approved alternate and who is not. And then you can also do what-if analysis. So as you put in a specific product, if the energy efficiency is slightly different and it's going to affect the project, or the consumption is slightly different and it's going to affect the project, you can see how it could potentially snowball into other changes in the project and make decisions to whether it's worth accepting an alternate or not. And then post-bid, updating the model based on the actual components that were selected and getting those in, so somebody may or may not choose to bring that into the project if an owner is looking for a true as-built. And then brings you into construction and construction management, where as change orders occur, as changes are made to the model, as alternates are selected, all this information can be brought into the model and to reflect the actual installed product. So if there was a delay in the ability to get a specific window and you wanted to swap it out for something else, you can make that change in the model, and then all of that information is reflected. And post-construction, when all this information is finalized, you can simplify your closeout documents and hand off all of the BIM data in a nice neat database file, so that way you can do life cycle assessment, or a facilities manager can do life cycle assessment and forecasting for replacement, analysis of the building for its merits, and that's pretty much running the gamut from cradle to cradle. I mean, I didn't really go into retasking, but you could certainly extrapolate where you could go from there. Yeah, and then why should a knowledge manager be used? Mainly, it's a single point of responsibility. You can homogenize project information with the project documents. You have a single person with expertise in product and systems, so they can get the appropriate components to you the same way that they get the appropriate components in forms of documentation to you, i.e. project specs. So they can tell you what components and assemblies should be used and why. This is where it builds upon the role of the specifier. So the construction documents are a part of the IPD process and a part of the actual BIM. And it allows components and assemblies to be selected earlier in a design. Now, I'm not saying that all components and assemblies should be selected early. What I am saying, though, is that as design decisions are made, future decisions can be made on accurate information. So as decisions are made at any given point, you can make future decisions based on the most current information. Because oftentimes when decisions are made in a project about products too early, all it does is just kind of end up throwing dirt in the water. So, but what it can do is as those decisions are made, it helps make future decisions. And then it simplifies content sourcing. You're not hunting and pecking through the world trying to find just the right window. Somebody else is getting that for you, and it's just something that's inherently done. And again, it increases the roles and responsibilities of the specifier. They assume the responsibility of the information through the project lifecycle, and they assume the responsibility of digital BIM elements or content. So if you need a hand dryer, they can reach out and grab a hand dryer for you, make sure it's formatted to the specific unit that you're looking for or the specific standards that you're looking for, and hand it over to you so the architect can place it in its appropriate locations. And then, the concept of an automated system versus a knowledge manager. I mean, there are software packages out there that give you the ability to, generate a specification from from BIM information. There are some pitfalls to it. It's difficult to use, and it's additional software to learn. But the big one is that software doesn't compete with the experience of somebody who knows products and understands them. There are too many X factors involved with product selection to leave it in the hands of a computer. There's too many different building codes, too many different project requirements, and to try to create an algorithm that could make a determination of all that information is probably not practical, and is probably more easily solved by having an individual do it. The intuition and performance history of a specifier, understanding the products that are going into the project, the understanding of the building codes, the understanding of the owner's design intent, and the basic nuances, the differences in performance.
So Bob, so maybe we should try to engage people and see if there's, how this is resonating with them. I think you've kind of laid out the concept, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, if people have questions, please, by all means, raise your hand.
Yeah, they're pretty quiet. So either they've heard most of this last time, or they're not sure what you're talking about, or they're in complete agreement, or they I don't know.
Yeah.
I have a question just to kind of get the dialogue opened up a little bit.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of the name of it, but I believe in the AIA's new integrated project delivery contract guidelines, their contracting guidelines. There is a new position identified to manage the submittals that come in and deal with those, because if you're getting models that the architect's generating and that are coming from subs and consultants, I mean, how is that being managed? And isn't that part of what's identified in the IPD process?
Well, yeah. Exactly.
There is a BIM manager. Is this the same as a BIM manager? If anybody wants to, join in the conversation, send me a note or raise your hand, and I'll unmute you. Yeah. Would it be the same as the BIM manager in a firm?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's if you were to take the BIM manager and give them the experience on products and systems, you would basically, you'd be able to create this role. Or if you take the specifier and you give them the knowledge of a BIM manager, so it's sort of a hybrid between specifier and BIM manager.
Yeah. Peter Ziskowski, you had your hand raised and I unmuted you.
Yeah, I think I like where this is going, and I think it's necessary, but I see this as more as it needs to be a knowledge management team than just a knowledge manager, where a specifier is part of that knowledge management team, which by default brings them in earlier, because on top of specifications, on top of that kind of information, there's other data that needs to be shared early in the process. And I think that, again, there's a hybrid between BIM manager, and I think most people view a BIM manager as being either part of the architectural team or that each consultancy has their own BIM manager. And I think there needs to be a holistic BIM execution team to really bring this about. And I think the specifier should be part of that team. And I think that the rest of the team doesn't view that position as being something that needs to be brought in early. And I think it would bring more, again, or bring them in earlier.
Yeah, Jeffrey and Richard, I also have unmuted you, so join in if you'd like.
Hi, I'm on the owner's side. We're a hospital, and I'm in the facilities group. And I do part of the role here of managing our CAD and trying to get into BIM. I think we're fortunate that we have this group internal, but I'm not sure if that's going to work for a lot of facilities. I kind of see a BIM manager being combined with this process that you're talking about, someone as a knowledge manager. And for those facilities like ours that can't afford someone or won't have someone in-house, this could be an architect's office or a contractor's office, a service that you could offer up to say, hey, we can help manage your data if you can't do it internally. But I see this as a problem as so much information gets into your model. Who's managing it? How do you tie it into your systems?
Well,
and that's exactly it. And that's where the concept of a knowledge manager, and as I said earlier, it may be a person, it may be an entity. The concept is that the knowledge manager is the single point of responsibility. So just as a project manager, it has people beneath them that are working on a project. A knowledge manager may have one person who's managing the information on the engineering side, on the architectural side, on somebody who's dealing with sourcing content. It's going to be a more than likely it's going to be more than one person that's working the task. But I think still having a single point of responsibility that can answer to any problems that may arise, and then that person would source it to their people.
I see this becoming overwhelming and just so much information and how to tie it into your, like you said, your model, your maintenance programs, all the ongoing stuff.
Well,
and how to keep it current.
I would agree with you that it sounds very, very overwhelming. But I think part of the problem is that everybody is still looking at the BIM, at the model, as the place where all the data should be stored, and that's not actually the case.
Right.
The model, the BIM, is only a tool in the entire arsenal that we have. What really needs to happen is essentially a cloud-type idea where the data gets harnessed somewhere in a central database and then gets sent out to who should be the authoritative people. Because while there are specifications that are coming from the design side, there's still a facility management aspect of it in terms of maintenance logs and things like that, that the FM team needs to be the authority on that and publishing the data back and updating the BIM. And there are solutions out there that can help with that, but really what we're starting to talk about here is a database where specifications are part of the database, but there's so much more information to manage on top of that.
No, exactly. I mean, because the contracting team is going to have a considerable amount of information. The owner's side, the FM team, is going to have a considerable amount of information. The design team, the specifications team, everybody is going to have information involved here. And you know, the only information that really needs to be actually in the model is stuff that needs to be used for analysis. Everything else can actually be linked out via a URL and having some sort of, like you said, a cloud where information is being stored, or multiple clouds where here's where you link out to the information for facilities management. Here's where you link out to the information for product information, and here and here and here. And then any information that may be used for model analysis as far as structural performance, energy performance, stuff that third-party software or internal software needs to review. That's the kind of stuff that really that should be in the model. Everything else, if it's just data-driven, can be linked out, or if it's informational, can be linked out.
That's the way I was looking at this as well. Having an external database, but the key is that interface to be able to get that information in and out as needed and move it along.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's the part that scares me.
Yeah, I mean, and I think everybody's going to have a different take on it. Personally, the way that I work, I have a specific method that I'm working with, but the idea is that this role can actually be tailored to fit anybody, you know, any project needs. Whether you just want to have knowledge management to update the model, or you want to have it from cradle to cradle to get a true as-built at the end of the project, you could do this in one of several different ways, depending on what suits you and what the budget is.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bob, maybe I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I like the idea of this being an ongoing process, though, and that's the way it has to be looked at. And that's why I'm saying it doesn't have to be directly at the owner. It could be a service that someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm leaning towards it being a service. You know, and this is actually something that my company is beginning to offer as a service. So because it's something that at this point it may not be ready to be inside of an architect's office, but the ability to train people within an office that can do this for their firm is a benefit as well.
So, Bob, I'm thinking that maybe, you know, given the other things we want to try and cover today, that, and this is actually a good point that kind of leads into where we're trying to tie this together, I think, which is if we are going to have this distributed process of information, it's not all in one model, it's not all done exactly one way. We need to be organized in order to do that. One of the tools for that is OmniClass. In fact, we think it's kind of a central tool, so we want to keep returning to how it's used and what's going on with it. And then actually we want to start talking about some implementation guidelines that would help anyone who's going to do this be able to do it within their firm. So maybe if we flip over now and talk a little bit about OmniClass, we have one of the members of one of the working groups that's going to give us an update on, maybe we'll just focus on the tables that Deb's worked on today, and over the next few meetings we can kind of hit some of the other ones that have been updated. So I think I'll take back the presentation, and is that okay?
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, the last slide that I had up, really we had just spoken through the concept of, you know, having somebody in-house do it versus having somebody who is you know, an independent specifier with knowledge of BIM or a knowledge management team that is you know, becomes another addition to the project team.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, whether it's an individual or a team or a consultant. So
right,
so
I think a lot of that is just based solely on the size of the project. Smaller projects you can use, you know, perhaps a single individual. Where you know, several projects that span several disciplines, has a lot of engineering, has a lot of you know, specialized architecture. You may have multiple people. But again, going back to it, it may make sense to have a single point of responsibility of each of those people that is managing information. So
yeah.
With that, I will hand this over. And step down from my soapbox.
Well, now I'll be on a soapbox because I think I'm not. This might sound self-serving. We're going to all immediately say OmniClass is the solution to all of these problems, but in fact, it's not really the solution, but I think it's part of a series of things that we need to do to better manage information, which is certainly what we've been exploring in this practice group since we launched it. And so we just wanted to, over the next several meetings, talk about changes that have been going on with OmniClass. I have up here just the high-level table structure of OmniClass, and there's actually updates taking place right now to several tables in OmniClass: the facilities, types, and spaces table, the products table, the properties table, and activities and processes tables are undergoing some updates right now. And we wanted to just give a little sense of what's going on there. Those are going to be coming out over the next few months as we are able to update and release those. So there will be new versions of those tables, along with several others, actually. The elements table and the work results table, which are uniformat and master format, respectively, are both being updated currently, and are actually the update to master format is coming out next month, and uniformat right after that in June. But today I thought maybe we'd talk about spaces and process. Deb, which ones are you actively working on? Are you there, Deb? Deborah McPherson?
Hi, yeah, so properties and spaces.
Okay. So
but then I also have I have a couple of the 30s ones because I sort of participate in that sometimes.
30. So
These phases and services, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about what's going on with this spaces by function table. Could you give us a little update on that?
Sure, I have. Do you want to turn the screen and I could show you?
Oh yeah, I could make you the presenter certainly. Let me see here. Well, let's see. I think I can do it. Yeah, there we go. All right, you're going to get we're going to see your desktop.
I actually have the properties table here first. We could start with that and then go back to the spaces in a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to hit a couple of them here today to kind of give people some sense of what's going on. So sure.
Okay, so in the properties, a lot of these, this is one table that definitely sits in the middle of everything. And part of when we were trying to get it more organized, it was useful to have these other tables, the other OmniClass tables, sitting here to start thinking about where would this end up going further. But so what's here right now is just a level 1, which is, and one big helpful thing that happened at one point was to separate out these identification properties. And I'm just going to start to open this up here so that you can see like facility, space, occupancy. This is getting into some of the more building code stuff. And then location properties, that's where you'd interface with the geographic information systems, and also where you're going to start to be able to keep track of like the buildings here, the manufacturer of this thing is here, and how that all relates to shipping and schedules. And then actually shipping and schedules, we put that separate, time and money. I guess that didn't work right. Source, this is all the manufacturer, and like this is one place where it's going to be a lot of overlap with the products table. And you want to just have everything in one place. So if something's in the products table, it doesn't really need to be in here. And then one of the bigger challenges of how to keep things straight was the difference between physical properties and the performance properties. And just as a rule of thumb, the physical properties just are, they are what they are. There's not much you can do about it. Whereas performance properties, that is more how you install it, what you're testing for, that sort of thing. And then the facility services got filled out a lot in these recent rounds. So now you can start to see some of the level 2. And I don't know if anybody's got questions about any of these, because you could probably spend more time, on any one of these and look through them. But what OmniClass, what I think this properties table is supposed to do is one, it's a set of terms that's the right terms, and they're in a context with each other. But they have to be generic too, because when you start dealing with things like street address, there are something like 11 standards of street addresses. So it can't be trying to solve all these problems that are involved with what occupancy classes are. Like you could spend your whole life talking about use groups, and that's why this is just, it's very simple, high level, only generic thing. So this is, I'm just showing you now the like political and legal is different than latitude and longitude, and you would want this information to be in your BIM in some place that it matters. That what can a region pick up from all these BIM models of buildings in their region?
Now, Deb, did the team look at the properties in the IFC model? And there's all kinds of IFC property identifiers. Have those been coordinated with this work?
Well, I think the next thing up is to really get this. It's sort of the opposite, that this could be applied to the IFD to help to classify, to apply some classification to the IFD. As far as the IFCs, I have taken a look at that a couple of times, like where do these classes start to overlap and where do they, and it's just like it's so apple and orange. They're different from each other. There was a lot of time.
Like when you talked about physical properties, I mean, there's all kinds of physical properties in the IFC model. So
right. I think that that's something that more time should be spent on that for sure. But like a direct comparison, I don't think they're two different sizes from each other.
Deb, this is Jeff Follett with Nemetschek North America. Could you scroll back up towards the top there for identification properties?
Sure. Yeah.
In fact, if you look at the facility identifications and stuff like that, there's an exact overlap with many of the identification properties in IFC. And I guess my concern is, or my interest is that, not duplicating identification properties over, what is provided in the IFC specification. Right, so that people are entering them in one place and not in another, or because from a developer's point of view in the software side, the question becomes, where is the entry or the input of that information, and how does it make itself into the right place, not only in the native data set for whatever application you're in the native model. But then when I translate and I export out to IFC, where do I get it from and how do I get it there?
Right.
And many of us already have in our applications these type of identifications or these means of input so that they make it over through the IFC model.
And you don't want to re-engineer any of that that's already done. I think
Exactly.
that's where I'm trying to say about the size of it. It's, 1,000 items here, just, 1,100, as opposed to the IFCs and the IFD, which is thousands and thousands.
So the idea was to keep it high level as an organization structure, and I think what maybe needs to be done yet is to go back and maybe rationalize or look at how the structure compares to what's in IFC. I do think that...
Or even create a map, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a role that the IFD library is intended to play because it can be used for mapping. It has the IFC model properties. It already has other properties, and these will be there, so we could, that can be a mechanism for mapping.
And I think a good place to start too, and I know the entire specification is very daunting, but I think one place to start would be with the new coordination view, the 2.0 coordination view, and to see, what properties and what information, which data is going to be required in that coordination view, because that is the essential set of data that's going to be used for certification for all applications coming up at the end of the year. And that would be a good place to start.
I think that's a good comment that we have to have some kind of implementation guidance for these OmniClass tables and something to look at. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a risk of breaking this discussion off here and deferring further work on OmniClass to a subsequent meeting just because we had one other thing we wanted to try and identify today. And if you can hang with us, this does all sort of fit together, I think. I think there's lots of sort of detailed discussion about how to implement these tables that would be interesting to have. But we were looking as well as how the tables work at how we could basically start to write some guidance for implementing the organization of information, which a lot of that would involve how do you utilize OmniClass in your practice. Jeffrey, you're talking about sort of as a software developer, how do I implement this and utilize it? A lot of us here are also dealing with information in databases or documents or things that we're managing ourselves, and part of our concern is how do we use these tables for that purpose.
Correct.
And maybe to some extent relying on the software to give us some options for that.
Well, or even like one thing we've talked about here at Cannon Rope briefly is that, you have a BIM library and you're trying to, you just need to keep the names and the paths short because what you're allowed is something like 256 characters. And sometimes when people are just making objects, throw, lots of them at us, naming them whatever, making the folder name something, and there's just you want some organization to it, and there's something about the level 1, 2, 3 that happens in OmniClass that could get overlaid and applied to that. For the one reason alone of being able to do some of this roll-up and make the folder and path names shorter, just because it'll be a little less ad hoc.
It would be interesting to see some kind of, develop some kind of example. Mm-hmm. I don't know if where the work groups are on that kind of thing, but that is a little bit of where we were trying to go with. We've had it on our to-do list from when we first started this practice group to think about some shared best practices or implementation guidelines. And so if I could request, what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about where we are on that, because we're trying to look for some support, help, involvement from the group. So maybe, Deb, if if it's okay with you, I'm going to just say let's leave it at this table for now, and maybe we'll schedule some more time in the future to talk about some of the other tables and what's going on with them. I think this has been good to see. Here's one table. Here's what's going on with the OmniClass working group. We're getting into these tables and doing a lot of adjustment to them. So, would that be okay with you?
Absolutely, yeah. But I also think the spaces table is definitely worth talking about, maybe even having a session just on that, because that is in Revit 2010 already and some other software, and I think that can end up being a super useful.
Yeah, actually, the properties table is embedded in Revit as well.
The old one? Yeah.
So hopefully they will update to the new one. And they're using, in a few places, they're planning to move over to the product table. Oh, I guess I should take the screen back.
Oh, yeah.
Although that's
I think so.
Fine-looking
here they are.
Friend you have there. Okay. So why I was cutting Deb off was to give us a few minutes to talk about what we want to do to work on establishing best practices. I'm going to just pull up some work that we've been doing, if I can find the right. That's not it. I don't know what that is. Excuse me. Here we go. Okay, so Bob, our practice group leader, and Greta Eckart and I have been starting to try to take something that we actually started a while ago, we've shared with the group, which was a suggested outline for a guide to implementing BIM for the kinds of areas of practice that we deal with at CSI and our members deal with. In particular, specifying contract administration, product representation, and to the extent we've been exploring it on the last couple calls, knowledge management. So we have this outline, which actually you can see it up on the CSI wiki under CSI BIM guidelines if you want to find it. We've talked about that before. But Greta, who's on the line, has started to think about how we would look at this from a specifier's perspective and what's going on with OmniClass, and start to develop some shared guidelines. So we're trying to get this started and then look for help. Greta, do you want to give we've got only about less than 10 minutes, but maybe you can give sort of a quick overview of what you've been thinking and trying to do.
Thanks, Roger. Actually, I think 5 minutes or so is probably plenty at the moment. I'm really delighted to follow this discussion about updates of OmniClass, because when I was thinking about what CSI could offer for BIM guidelines that would be useful to at least people I know in architecture, and that it would be logical that people would look to CSI for this particular information, I felt that it had to do with CSI traditionally supporting standards and formats and classification systems. And so I kind of went through, I tried to use the IPD phases of a project, and I would actually like to harmonize these very draft outline that you're about to see, so that it agrees with, I'm not sure, so that it agrees with the OmniClass table for phases. It's not completely different, but I think I could harmonize it a little better. There are 6 slides, and maybe we could go to the first one. I mean the second one.
All right, I will do that. I'm trying to find out where the noise is coming from.
Okay, I don't think it's coming from my end. It seems to have gone.
Well, it went away, so that's good.
And
okay.
So what I tried to do is think in each phase from my perspective, working in an office as a specifier and working with lots of teams doing different things. Which of these tables do I need to educate people I work with about at different phases of the project. And I've actually had some very interesting conversations with different project managers and principals in this office about especially the space tables. So I kind of agree with Deborah that it would be fantastic to have a whole session talking about classification of spaces and all the uses that you could put that to. So this page that you're looking at, conceptualization, okay, when a project is first thought of by an owner, at the top of each of these slides I listed, well, who are the major participants, sort of trying to tie this back to the practice groups, but also including maybe the more traditional designations, owner, architect, etc. And this is my first pass at identifying some of the tables that will contribute to our work and organizing information. And I also resonate a lot with what Deborah said about if we could only label things consistently and we could find things more readily, have shorter file paths, etc. And so so in conceptualization, you know, I think the slide kind of speaks for itself. I'm not going to read every line of the slide. But what I would really love is if there was some way we could post this in a place where people could give feedback. And ultimately, perhaps we want to take each of these phases and have, you know, an individual help develop the detail. I realize that identifying classification systems for each phase is not everything that's needed, but it seemed like a first step. Let's see what all this thinking that's already gone on to organize information can give us, and then how will it fit in at different times during our projects.
Right. I mean, it might be worth as well as identifying the table. First, identify the kind of information that you're dealing with that you need to manage at each phase, and then which OmniClass table applies to that kind of information, and then, you know, we could start to maybe write about how we're actually using it at that phase or show an example or something.
I mean, I tried to do that to a certain extent, and it certainly could be a lot more full.
Yeah, I see where you start to do that. Well, maybe this is something, Greta, we could post this, you know, one of these phases maybe on the wiki and see if we could get some interest in people to go up and mark it up if we put something there and gave them a specific request.
Does this make sense to other participants or do you have comments on this as a useful thing for, I don't know, owners, architects, product reps to be able to start?
Yeah, if anybody wants to chime in, you know, we only got, well, we really probably only have a minute or two left. Jeffrey, I'll unmute you. You can speak up if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great to have this posted somewhere where we could comment and kind of look over it at our, I wouldn't consider it leisure, but whatever spare time we do have, and give our input. You know, I think even at the level of conceptualization and the things that we've been working with the GSA, are things like spaces to them are more important than even other elements, right? I mean, well, they care about those in a way that they determine the feasibility of a project, even from that the idea of does it meet the spatial program requirements that we're setting forth. And
yeah, they're very involved with that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, the next slide is criteria design, and that starts to get into that. And perhaps, you know, these tables do need to be moved up into conceptualization. You know.
And you used the IPD phases from AIA, right? Is that what you?
That's right. And I think they're similar to Table 31 phases, but I think Table 31 has actually subdivided some of the phases rather usefully. So,
yeah, so as long as we have some agreement at some level, I think that's as close as we're going to get. Well, I think we're out of time, so we wanted to just get this out there, and maybe what we'll take on is to post one or two of these up on the wiki and send an email out to the practice group, invite them to come and go in and comment and write suggestions or add to what's there, and then we'll see what that looks like. And maybe along with that, we might ask for a group of volunteers that if anyone's interested in working more closely on the project, we'd like to try to expand this out and deal with the specifying area first and then look at some of these other practice areas as time goes on. So, Greta, anything you want to say in closing on this? I know I didn't give you much time, but at least we got the concept out there.
I think actually the idea of maybe each month having an update on one OmniClass table might be, aside from maybe having a whole session on the space tables, making sure we're all up to speed on what's happening with the development of other tables as well might help.
Yeah, and then we could tie it together with this process maybe to show how we're, if we're starting to add some, here's how you'd implement this table. This is where it shows up in the different phases and what kinds of information it allows you to manage, and then start to maybe develop some guidance for how to use it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, I don't really have any further concluding remarks.
Okay, well, then I think we'll close this part off and go back and wrap things up. Bob, you want to?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad we took the opportunity to go over construct at the beginning, because it looks like we, as usual, run long. But I wanted to thank everybody for coming to the meeting. I hope to meet some of you at Construct next month. But if you have any questions, I'm at robert@sumexdesign.com, or you could get Roger at rgrant@csinet.org. And we have a series of web addresses just for links to more information on, CSI and CSI's new website. If you haven't checked it out, it's a lot cleaner. It's very nice. The wiki, some more information on OmniClass. My blog, which I haven't updated in a long time, the forums, CSI's blog, and the IFD library. So, and
we post the notes from the meeting on the CSI blog, so you can pick those up there.
So with that, thank you everybody for coming to listen in, and we'll talk in, I guess, 2 months from now.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And also, if you have anything you want to make a presentation on that you think would be of interest to the group, please feel free to, please be encouraged to email either myself or Bob, and we'll work you in.
All right, thanks everyone. And thank you, Greta and Deb, for adding into our presentations today. Very, very helpful.
Okay, thanks all.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.